Welcome back to the show. We have indie filmmaker himself, Josh Monkarsh, is on the show. Here to share a few stories. He and I had a mutual pal, stunt coordinator Chris Gann, and it was just an honor to review the screener of As We Know It.
Yeah.
Talk about prestigious. You've been at the New York Film Academy. You've done some various editing and cinematography. And
Yeah.
what? Where do you think
Australia.
this courage comes from, though?
Well, it's one of those things like always kind of floating around the back of my head in terms of, my ambition for filmmaking. And, really it just depends on what I'm doing in my life at any particular time, right? So like there was a while, after film school, I tried out kind of the independent filmmaking thing. But this was back in the early 2000s, right? When it was a little bit tougher.
Oh,
Um,
so tough. People are
yeah,
still not sure whether cable TV or DVD is going to
exactly.
be a bigger factor.
Right. Yeah. And like the only real network you could kind of appease to was IFC,
Hmm.
right? At that time, right?
Yeah.
And then the Sundance Channel came out, right? So like those were kind of like the two ones. So just because there was, at the time, not that many outlets for independent films, I took a break from that world for a minute. And then it wasn't actually until like 2010 when I started producing a bit.
Hmm.
And then it wasn't until COVID 2020 when I'm like at this point where, we're all quarantining and stuff. And I was like, you know what? Um, I want to give directing another go.
Sweet.
Yeah. So like that was kind of, just that whole process of quarantining that really inspired me to do it again.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, and it's funny because when you're working as a producer on a movie, you can only insert like so many notes.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
No, totally.
um, right.
There'll be some kind people who will say you're right, that does work better, and then you'll get the rude, duly noted ones to where you're like, okay, why am I here?
Yeah, exactly, man. Exactly. And like, and I guess what was happening is like maybe there was like a couple like creative indifferences and like, no bad blood or anything, but it's like, all right, maybe in order for me to like really kind of put my stamp on something, I have to direct it. And it proved to be so true of
Hmm.
a thought, like when I thought that, I'm like, okay, you know, hopefully it'll be like that, right? And I was lucky enough for As We Know It to be like literally involved in like from page to screen and even in post. And so I was fortunate enough to be around for like literally every step of this project,
Yeah.
which was great, man. It was a great experience.
Perfect. How did the collaborations with both Thomas Jane and Kay Escher Levin first start up?
Okay, so yeah, that's it's interesting, man. That's an interesting story, actually. Um, so I actually reached out to Tom Jane, I want to say 10 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, and
Close to me.
I wanted at the time to option a comic book that he had co-authored called Bad Planet.
Mm.
It's actually like beautifully illustrated.
He's a big
Uh,
comic book guy, but I have heard how he will bring storyboards to pitch meetings and everything. That's cool. That's great.
yeah. So I was working at the time with this company, Palm Star, and I was trying to figure out ways to create content and, looking for different types of IP. And so, yeah, so I reached out to Tom about Bad Planet, and, you know, the consensus was it's way too expensive to do as an independent film. It's, I mean, if for those who are listening, if you Google Bad Planet, check it out. Um, you're welcome, Tom. Uh, basically, it's just like this kind of Star Wars meets Alien meets I want to say like Buckaroo Banzai. Well, yeah.
Very, very zany, very out of this world.
Yeah, it's cool. It's really cool. But yeah, as a movie, it wasn't possible. So long story short, we kind of kept the relationship going, like sending each other different stuff and articles and stuff. And my brother-in-law is actually Asher Levin. Um,
Sweet.
and yeah, and so when Asher was casting his project Slayers, there
Yep.
was this character, Elliot Reck. Is it Elliot Reck? I'm not sure the last name, but it was um, like a very kind of gritty type of guy who, in
Hmm.
my mind, I'm like, okay, this is Tom, this is TJ, like, and he's kind of one of those actors where he's a chameleon, right? Where like,
Yeah.
right, he could like when I recently watched him in what was it, The Predator, the
Hmm.
remake, right? When he was kind of the escape mental patient.
Yep.
Um, he was schizophrenic and he took on this whole other thing, right? So like that's kind of the great thing about him. But for this role, it was more or less just like this zany, wild vampire hunter dude who I'm like in my mind thinking, okay, this could be him. And it was
He'll
kind of
go
a
there if you want him to.
exactly, he'll go there. And so right, so I sent him the script, he loved it, and then yeah, he attached himself to the movie, and um, yeah, he actually it was his attachment that ended up getting that movie made. It was at least the first step, in getting it made. Um, so yeah, that's whole the story that essentially was the foundation of that relationship.
Lovely. And I love these types of chats because you hear about just so many pitch meetings that end awful, like someone
Yeah.
indirectly takes another person's idea,
Yep.
or because it keeps not being made, everyone's just like, well, we're never going to talk to each other again. We're
Yep.
we're, we're cursing each other. It's so cool to just say, hey, let's just keep emailing each other and see what sticks.
Yeah. No, 100%, and it's cool. It's one of those things where like, content, it is so important, right? Because as
Yep,
you can imagine, like guys like TJ, like they're getting stuff sent to them every day, and it's a lot of stuff to sort through.
totally.
Nearly impossible. I mean, even me, like when I'm looking for new content, that's one of the hardest parts, right? Is finding that right one. But um when you're lucky enough to have an actor read a character and kind of dive into that character before they're even cast, like
Hmm.
kind of imagine themselves in that role before they're cast, especially when it's not an audition situation but it's more of like a straight offer. That's even
Oh
better,
man,
you know
no pressure.
yeah, exactly, man, exactly.
Man,
Yeah,
so I love this kind of ambitiousness. So, how would you describe your experience at the New York Film Academy? Because I've heard some people had a fun time, and then I heard others who
yeah,
were just like,
mixed
whatever.
mixed reviews. um Great question. I love to kind of say that I know what the New York Film Academy, formula is. I don't, unfortunately, but what I can speak to is when I was there, it was pretty amazing.
Mhm.
Mainly because we were still shooting on film.
Oh, lovely. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I do know because my they have like a camp now, I guess, at near Film Academy. My nephew was there and he was saying they're all video now, digital now, which, it's great. But with film, the experiences that I had shooting on, the 16 millimeter Airflex, and we had to use the daylight spools, pop them in, and we were, that whole part just, being able to kind of learn every part, um,
Hmm.
you know, from loading to, you know, essentially like being
At
your own
least
DP.
try each one once before you
Yeah,
say, I won't do that
exactly.
again.
Yeah, totally, man. Like the loading thing is tough,
I
like,
did load it once, and I
oh
didn't.
yeah,
Uh, my my issue with my college wasn't so much a uh how to do this and everything. It was more just a lack of communication and commitment to everyone helping each other
Yep,
out. And I was
yep,
like,
yep,
well,
yep.
why are we all in class together if we're all just going to be lone dogs? You know?
Different things. Yeah, and that does happen. We had some groups, because it kind of like fraction out into groups, right? Um,
Yeah. Everyone
right. So
scratch each other's back and say, hey, yeah.
exactly, man, exactly. And some groups, I will say, like did work better than others. We got pretty lucky with our group where like everybody kind of understood their position, right?
Hmm.
And that part was great. So yeah, I mean, to answer your question, it was a good experience. The other, mainly because like we got our hands dirty, right? And not only was it cool to kind of get our hands dirty when being on set and actually like, handling the camera, but also we were cutting back in the day. This was the
Oh,
early
man.
2000s. We were cutting the film with these they were called Steenbecks, which are these older German editing like dinosaurs,
Yikes. Okay, man.
huge, and these things are massive. And you're sitting there and you're actually physically cutting and taping, and that was incredible, man. Like just to be able to do that was awesome.
Man. And
Yeah.
that would have been before. I'm trying to remember what was the one before Final Cut and Adobe took over. There was
Oh, yeah. I know you're talking about. I can't think of a name, but yes,
it always is one of those brief names and everyone knows it. And
yep,
I
yep,
would see people complain about it's great, but why is it considered like professional? But I can't use Sony Vegas unless it's like
right.
a like random concert shoot in Nevada where no one cares. It's interesting how
Exactly.
which
Yeah,
apps took over and were considered like, you know, that is elite, that is professional. You must use that versus
right.
you can't use that's only beginner level stuff.
Level stuff. Yeah, no, you're right, man. You're right. And it was also expensive, like with Avid when it
That's
came
the one.
out.
Avid. Yes,
Is
Avid.
that Avid?
Avid.
That's your thing?
Yes.
Yeah, Avid. And Avid is like still pretty easy, like
Yeah.
compared to like with the other software, right? It's like pretty like fundamentally like solid. Um, but yes, like at the time when it came out, it was so expensive. And I think like I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe you know better than I do.
I
But I think it
actually
might have
don't
been,
know.
you don't know. Okay, it might have been like Lucas's team that helped kind of build the Avid, maybe. Um, that's worth a Google.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
Because they were always pretty technology friendly, and
Yes.
it's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
you want to get your feet wet, come work at our, behind the scenes at the ranch.
yeah, behind the scenes of the ranch. Exactly, man. So yeah, so that was cool, like cutting, and then we would take it to the telecine, and then they would kind of transfer it onto, you know, whether it was like VHS or DVD. And then that was that. So like that part of it was cool just because it was kind of like an antiquated approach, which at the time was not antiquated, but looking back now, of course it is.
Mm,
You know what I'm saying? Like just having that kind of foundation was very helpful.
totally. And you've spoken on your bio on how you were a studio courier, delivering equipment. Isn't it
Yeah.
wild how that, along with delivering coffee, is like the oldest trick in the book?
Oh yeah, man. No, it is.
Delivering mail, and people will pay attention to you and say, okay, this guy, treats this 9 to 5 as more than just
Right.
another gig.
Well, no, you're right, man. And it's also like when you're a courier or maybe like delivering coffee, whatever, you're also like just being around that world and you're kind of like just soaking up the energy.
Soaking
Um,
up is the best way to put it. Yeah, you're kind of,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
magnetic.
exactly. Like this was a crazy story. When I was a courier, um, I was delivering something to Fox on Pico,
Oh
and
man.
yeah, and this was around 97 or no, it couldn't have been 97. It was like 98, 99 around there, like late 98. And when I was going to deliver the package, I saw on like a 8 by 10 sheet on a door, um, episode 1 meeting.
Man.
And
So
and
you're
that was
you're
and
the wise person.
I was like, oh my God, like what do I do? Like do I put my ear to the door, like, but and it was one of the, I was tested in that situation for sure, right? So I like hung out a little bit around the door, and the door opened, and like I didn't see Lucas. I don't God, who knows if he was even there, but that's just an example of like being around when that
They'll
type of
know who, tampered. And who.
yeah, exactly. So no, so fortunately for them, it was soundproof the room, but it was just cool being in their presence at that time.
Kind of don't you wish more of that was the case?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
because I resaw the newer Battlestar Galactica Blu-rays, and they had a hysterical special feature where they're back when internet rumors were the worst, people would,
Yep.
anyone from extras to PAs would leak something onto the internet. They
Oh yeah.
decided to film like 5 different scenes,
Oh,
and
yes, they had to.
the producers whispering to like the AD, and the director jokes to the camera is like, I won't know what's the actual scene until I go to the edit room
Yeah.
tomorrow.
No, I mean, I gotta say, like, it's a problem, but it's a good problem to have, I guess, right?
It
Um,
encourages more creativity. People are still,
yeah,
you can't say I predicted it. No, you didn't.
yeah, exactly. Well, and like, if you think about it, if you're a filmmaker, right, that's in that position where you have the budget, right, to like make five
Oh yeah.
different, right, and like, there's that much of the desire to know, the need to know, like, what is going on,
Mhm.
like, that's a success, man, in my mind, at least.
That totally. Hey,
Yeah.
I think so many. Uh, yeah. Well, so let's talk about how when you got into the chair, that this is
Yeah.
a fun, very laid back zombie film. I saw it so hyped up, and uh,
Yeah.
I I loved how you kind of paid tribute to the whole one location.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
everything's hitting the fan, and reminding the audience, hey, you are here to laugh, but what would you actually do in this doomsday scenario?
Yeah. What would you really do?
And you got to just laugh because any choice you make is still going to be very absurd because zombies by default are absurd.
Well,
Um,
yeah, I mean, they are. I mean, like historically,
death is
right?
absurd in some cases, not to be too literal, but it's just like,
Yeah.
man,
Yeah.
it's like you're
Right.
you're you're bringing up some fun content, and uh you
Thank
know
you.
uh
I appreciate that.
I think Charles Parnell set the mood perfectly, especially in between all the synthwave 80s music montages. And
Yeah. I mean, he was so much fun to work with, and kind of like what I imagined when we were writing this thing. Um, as Ted Summers. I mean, he like that was one of the first roles that actors that popped into mind for a role was him was Chris. I was like, oh yeah, this is Ted Summers.
lovely.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
uh, uh what do you feel like you want to capture next, now that you have been comfortable? You've produced so many shorts, you've done
Yeah. Yeah.
thrillers, and now you tested the horror comedy route.
Yep. Yep.
What do you think you really want to conquer next?
So yeah, I mean, I think for the next one, I probably will stay away from, and not like for any particular reason, but I'll probably stay away from the horror comedy and focus more on the darker comedy genre.
Sweet.
And yeah, and it's mainly because it's more of a test. Um, when you're dealing with comedy horror, it's a lot easier to get those laughs because, like you said, you're dealing with zombies who are already kind of absurd in by nature, right?
Oh, that's so cool that you had a supporting crew, and
Yeah.
you were willing to test out these ambitious ideas. I'll tell you, I had an awful college experience in that I kept encountering professors, and you're going to find this
uh,
laughable. They were
yeah.
like, you can do anything you want except gangsters, zombies, and space battles, because you
That's amazing.
can't relate to that in real life.
Oh my God.
What part of that makes any sense at all? It's a
That's
movie.
not
You
yeah,
have to
that's not
buy the
good.
bait.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that's good advice, right? Because if you look at
I mean,
every genre film, like you need a hook.
you could
Um,
say any of them are implausible. It's just like it's just what
totally,
sticks, but
totally,
you
totally.
can't relate to it in real life. Well, I thought the
Right.
filmmaker's job was to make a incomprehensible situation plausible.
Yeah, that's a little, yeah, that's maybe like that professor was just like taking projects too literally.
I think they were full of themselves.
Yeah, like
That
you
was
got like
so weird.
yeah, you got to find the humor, man. Like at least for my style of filmmaking, even when you're making a drama, like I always feel like there's room to make it a dramedy, um,
Might as
if
well, yeah.
possible. Like it's just like you got to have for me, like there's flaws in everybody, weaknesses in everybody. It's my kind of whole angle and an idea.
Hmm.
And I would say goal as a filmmaker is to kind of expose those vulnerabilities and insecurities and have them at the end of the day be kind of like more of a laughable slash teachable moment,
Yeah,
if anything. Yeah.
totally. I mean, if you're not going to learn it from any of this, why do any of it? It's so much fun putting a puzzle together. It's
Yeah, totally, man, totally. So yeah, so to answer your question, the dark comedy would be the next project, and it's definitely kind of, and I'm working on it now. I can't tell you too much about it,
oh,
but I can tell you it is another period piece. This one is set in the 1970s, um, and we will have more than one location, so the
woo.
budget will be yeah, budget will be a little bit greater, and you know set design will be a lot of fun and can't wait to get started on that one, but it is not a horror, it's more of a dramedy,
Mm,
mixed with a little I want to say action slash thriller, so that's the
sweet.
vibe. Yeah.
And have you ever thought of remastering Subway Cafe and the High
Oh
Life
man.
onto like streaming or DVD, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I have there's this process called what is it, telescopic rotoscoping, where
Mm.
they apply this kind of animation effect over footage. A Scanner Darkly was a film that
Yeah, yeah, link letter. Yeah.
Linkletter, right, did, and they use that technology. Now, my understanding is it's come a long way since then. So I've thought about taking that and putting it over um, the High Life because I do think it would work for that. Subway Cafe, possibly. I just don't. I don't know. I think that would have to be like a total reimagination. Like, and I just don't know if the footage is there. Um,
Mm. Yeah.
maybe, right, right. But with High Life, I think there's definitely more of a chance of that happening.
I know what you mean. You don't want to risk damaging the elements when you're remastering them.
Yeah, exactly, man. And then there's also like, now I'm a lot pickier, I would say, like as a filmmaker slash editor. And so I might have a situation like with Subway Cafe, for example, where like I'm not happy with the footage and then we don't have a feature, we have a short, right? So
Mm.
like, you know, um, but never say never, who knows?
No, it's cool to keep it all open to where it's like, okay, this one I want to revisit, or this one I'm moving on from there.
Yeah,
Rather just
exactly.
do it all over again now, but with the pros.
Exactly. Well, right. And that was the other thing is like when I was making these movies, like Subway Cafe and The High Life, I was spreading myself way too thin. I was the cameraman. I was the director. I was the producer. I was the line producer. I was like craft services. I was the loader. Like it was crazy.
Oh man.
Um, yeah. I mean, granted, I was young at the time. I was like 19 or 20 years old. So like I had the energy to do that, but still like the product definitely suffered because I didn't have help. Right. So like that's, if anything for like, you know, filmmakers out there, younger filmmakers out there who are listening to this, like it really, really does help to ask for help. And it shouldn't be something you don't do.
Right? It's
Because,
not taboo,
you know,
guys. Just
it's
ask.
not taboo. Like you gotta ask for it. Yeah. Yeah.
Man, that, uh, now that uh, what advice would you have? I always love to ask these because film business can unfortunately still be pretty competitive. What solutions would you recommend for those who are letting just some snobs kind of wreck what they want to do, or
Sure.
just
Yeah.
need more motivation, like they know
Right.
what they want but not how to again start the show?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, honestly, like it's hard sometimes, but the best way that I find sometimes to, kind of spin the negativity is to use it. Um,
Mm.
yeah, just use it. Use it to either fuel the project and the passion. Um, or if it's like an insult slash note, because generally like there are notes sometimes in insults, whether or not
Yes,
the critic meant to do that, or like
true.
sometimes it's like, okay, well, he was kind of like an ass about that, but that might make sense, right? Um,
Right, he had a point, but he just was not constructive the way he said it. But you need to focus
yeah,
on what works for you
totally, totally,
versus,
man, totally.
who knows,
Uh,
people are cryptic sometimes they're a jerk just to get your attention and make you
yeah,
not go there anymore, and then you're like, okay,
right,
well,
right.
after the
And there
fact,
are
could
those,
you not do
yes,
that again?
totally. Yeah. So you hit it on the head. There are those haters as well, right? That will do anything to try to just like keep getting you down. And it's not positive at all, right? It's just continuous activity, right? And those are
Endless.
the but for me, like the way I look at it is like, and I've encountered a few of those, really like what they're doing is most likely projecting their own negative experiences that they have had onto you in that moment, right?
That could be it too.
Yeah. So right. So if anything, got to feel for that person in that moment, brush it off, and don't let them deter you at all.
It helps that there's a lot of great mental health and fitness podcasts, and almost all of them will bring up insecurity.
Yep.
Like that is the main source of anything, from an unpleasant person to
Oh
bullying
yeah.
to someone who's just a fear monger. They've let fear kind of ruin their lives, and they're now letting it impact you. And you're like,
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
fear, but I don't let it rule me.
No, exactly. You can. I mean, and it's right. It's good to take it and kind of try to turn it into something creative if possible. And
I hear
uh,
you. I'll validate you, but please
yeah.
don't bring it to my house or my film set or my family.
Right. Right. No, yeah, totally, man. I mean, if you look at like the review process, there are
Oh,
and
reviews. Yeah. Oh,
and the
dude.
studios they're relentless, and the studios are dealing with this issue too because that you have these people who they don't necessarily even watch the movie, like their sole intent
I
is
saw the trailer, therefore I'm giving it a
just
one.
kill it. They just want to kill it, right?
Yeah.
So that does make it harder for independent filmmakers especially, but even studio filmmakers.
I
And if
can tell you a funny story, dude.
yeah
I went onto this sci-fi web series. It was on all the streaming platforms, mainly Amazon at the time.
yeah
It had a lot of Babylon 5 and Star Trek people in it. And long story short, the effects were good. The tone was kind of confusing. Is it a mockumentary or is it just a straight
right
up sci-fi parody? What is it? And
yeah
but I had to just suffer through it and just do it myself because there was a lot of lame, like 1 out of 5 star reviews with poorly written grammar. It
uh-huh
looked like a 5-year-old just dissing the movie.
yeah
And then there was a bunch of reviews clearly by the filmmakers giving it 5 stars. So I was like, well, I don't know what I got. I don't know
you
if
know
I
you
should
got
buy
it.
it.
Yeah.
And so it
That's
was,
that, that's the
yeah,
and that's the problem, man. That's the problem.
it
But
really is. It's just so apparent. Like it's just like, okay, well,
yeah, well, I mean, and look, I think it is happening more with the studio films, like the larger films, for
mm-hmm.
example. I haven't seen it yet, but I do know that like Madame Web, I think has maybe like what is it, like a 17% or something on tomato
Yeah, it's
now.
not fresh and you don't know how much of it is. Maybe it's cheesy, but not
Right,
that
right.
bad, or maybe it is bad, but
Maybe it is
not
bad.
okay, perfect. So
Yeah. Yes. So for that, I mean, like you have to, there's a few things though, like because for example, when you have something like a Marvel film, right? The budget is so great. There has to be a way, like, and this is very hard part of the filmmaking process, the script, the screenwriting process, and making sure that you're kind of, sending out a well executed script to be made, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what happens, and this is really unfortunate, is when you have these big names that start to get attached to the project, and granted, like this is a huge studio movie, but still, you have these big names that are attached to the project. A lot of talent, they have their own input nowadays, especially if they're
Mm-hmm.
getting paid these types of figures, right?
I'll
And
do
then,
it, but not on this
oh yeah, but
day,
then
only
you got
in
to
this
change this,
state.
got to change that, right? And then there's like on-set revisions that are happening a lot of the time to these scripts as well.
Oh
And
yeah.
then look back and it's like, whoa, this does not represent the comic book at all, right?
Oh yeah, and
Like
the
what
fans are
is this? Like,
intolerable. Like
yeah,
they might, because like you say, there's someone who does have good ideas, but
yep,
then they're not realizing that it takes, again, it takes an army to craft this every day and try and make
yeah,
everybody happy. And
yep,
yeah, I mean, they don't seem to realize that famous people don't have, not everyone has time to read comic books, but at the same
no,
time, a Wikipedia article wouldn't take much long either. You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
this character
yeah,
doesn't
no,
do that.
absolutely, absolutely. And it's tough because I would say that for a lot of the original, Marvel Studio films, Iron Man and Winter Soldier and that
The
time
initial
for
run of just kind of the good versus evil was very accessible before it
exactly and
became, we're going to
totally,
have
man. And
50 more sequels.
yes, and it was so smart how they did it too because they pretty much were canon with everything for the most part.
Yeah.
Um, and like just the Red Skull and Captain America kind of going at it. Like that's what I remember reading in the comic book, right? But I just feel like maybe if you're kind of diverting too much from the original concept that everybody loved so much, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot from the start. And that's, I guess, my big issue. So I wouldn't say like I don't not get the critics kind of ripping apart the larger Marvel Studio movies that are kind of uh you know hand processed to a point where like you don't recognize them anymore. Um, but
No, it's a good quandary because,
yeah,
like, yeah, because I saw how there was a corporate media scandal with Rotten Tomatoes a year ago where they
yeah, yeah,
admitted
yeah.
that some critics, oh, so you heard of this one, some critics had taken some bribes for the last 5 years, and I was like, well, come on.
No, that's the problem,
I
man.
used to work for a blog I won't name, and they practically would even ask me at the end, did you give it at least a 3 out of 5? I'm like, well, I thought we were here to be honest.
Yeah,
Oh, I don't want them to complain and bash my blog. I'm like, well, that's very gutless. Like, I thought we are here to
yeah.
just help everybody
No,
get better.
you gotta own it, man. You gotta own it. Honestly, like what I would do right now, and obviously, this is just me speaking here, but if
Yeah.
I had a film, if I was at Marvel Studios, right? If I was in that position, I would actually take those negative reviews and I would print them.
There you go.
Seriously, print them.
Yeah, no,
Print
let's
them
learn from
with the previews.
what. In fact, that's what every other mega movie producer should do right now. Is like, let's
Yeah,
collect them instead of just acting like it's all just 5-year-old gamers who talk smack about
right.
anything. It's like, let's actually, what are they all commonly saying?
Yeah, own it. Like take the worst part out of all those quotes from all those bad, negative, rotten reviews and put them in the next trailer.
Absolutely. That would be, oh, in the trailer, that would be very amusing. That would be almost a
Put them in the
Deadpool
trailer.
level joke. There was
Dude,
this
I mean,
one site that used to do that where they would take like some of the most infamous movies of all time and they
yeah,
printed all their negative reviews on a poster.
I love that.
They did
I
one
love
for
that.
Battlefield Earth, I think, and then they did one for like just a bunch of the other just like sci-fi horror mishaps that angered
Yeah,
audiences and critics. There was one site that talked about Man of Steel, but it was a collection of both good and bad reviews, and they were pretty much
right.
just showing there was like a common quandary. Like they weren't sold on the star yet. They were a little iffy on the
Yeah,
slow motion and then
right.
the runtime, but ultimately they had a lot of the same pros in both the
Yeah,
good and bad reviews, where they're like, "Hey, we love the visuals, camera work, and themes. I'm like, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
no, that would be brilliant putting it in a trailer Deadpool style.
Yeah. I mean, and then you obviously have to cut a new trailer, but I mean, like at that point, instead of trying to fight it, just go with it. I don't know.
Totally. I mean, yeah, because like some of the, I know with some of the different comic books, they've had to change it either because they just didn't feel like they could make the character as likable or
Yeah.
satirical. Like I
Yep.
know they did it with Constantine. It's like, okay, so he's a demon hunter as opposed to a sarcastic, chain smoker in the
Yep.
comics. And
Yep.
Hellboy, I mean, Mike Mignola approved it, but he's kind of more of a taking out the trash as opposed to a, well, this is a weird world I live in,
Yep.
and,
Yeah. No, you're right.
and the
You're right.
boys, the same kind of deal. And yeah, I see some fans who clearly aren't. It's kind of like Secession. You can tell they're identifying with the despicable characters, but they're not actually
Uh-huh.
listening to what's going on. It's like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
satire is hard, I guess. In this day and age.
Yeah. No, it is tough, man. They are hard.
Oh
Um,
man.
I will say though, on the topic of Marvel and the whole DC franchise battle,
Review bombing and yeah.
the review bombing, I will say I do have to give Deadpool major props for
Holy man.
following the comic book so well, and I think they did such a great job at creating an on-screen version of Deadpool that reflects the comic book version of him. One of the few that I think they knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, it's such a shame that it was so chaotic behind the scenes. They wanted to kill
Hmm.
it, and then they kind of just expose the
Yep.
corporate side, and they pretty much had to laugh at their falling. You're like, well, now we got to release it. It's
Yep. Yeah, because
um,
they killed him in the Wolverine Origins film.
right, even more
Yeah.
confusing.
Yeah, they killed him, and and I think Ryan Reynolds addresses that, and and I think in part one or two, I'm not sure.
I think so. He does say something like this is like, hey, that wasn't the real me or
That wasn't
something.
me. Yeah, right. Totally.
Oh man. I know they're doing there's some other kind of satirical kind of comic books kind of being adapted in option, but it is kind of funny how Tim Miller also kind of had to do that with Sonic. Coincidentally, his visual effects
Mhm.
company was working
Oh
on it.
yeah, that was wild.
The Deadpool director, yeah, same deal. Where there's like the execs in Japan had been complaining to the studio for like months, and they had been
Yeah,
like, "Oh, it looks fine to us," and then they're looking at all the hate mail. And they're like, "Guys, we really won't see this movie. It does not look finished. It doesn't look well made. You should
evil, right?
redo the effects."
Evil Sonic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just
Yeah,
a
evil
trailer
Sonic.
can kill a movie now. I think there's just that overreaction now. You don't know how much of it is done versus it's it would work for a video game, but not for a movie.
Right,
It's just
right. I thought that evil Sonic was cool though. Like he kind of like had more character and more depth to him, I thought, than the one they went with. But you know, I see I see why they probably did it, probably for the kids, right?
they probably did. They wanted to go hard on the camp, and
Yeah, yeah.
maybe it was too much. I was willing to give it a shot just because of some of the star talent behind it. But it is interesting how I don't know. Like I will see so many people trying to analyze a trailer, even though some of them are very bright and know for a fact that that's the sell. That's not the actual product.
Hmm.
So yeah, I don't know how you get rid of that component when there's so many clickbait sites that want to jump on that bandwagon. Oh,
It's
five
tough.
things we know from the trailer. Well,
It, yeah,
we
it's
don't know
hard. It's
anything.
hard. Well, it's also like speaking of, IP, comic book IP, um, it's tough because, you know, if the studios that own the IP gave independent filmmakers more of a shot at, optioning the IP and making the project the way they would make it, I think you
Bingo.
would see, what I'm saying? I think you would see a lot more successful films like with Deadpool. That was a similar thing. Like that was kind of an indie film because they didn't, the odds were against them that they were going to have a success on their hands.
Right?
We'll return after these messages.
The Jacked Up Review Show podcast is honored to be part of the Blind Knowledge Podcast Network. Join anytime, talk the talk, and enjoy yourselves. There's something enlightening for everyone with this crowd of cool cats. Check them out.
Hey, it's Brent Pope, the host of Breakfast with Brent Pope. You've seen me on some of your favorite TV shows saying things like, "Give it up, Jimmy. You got to sink this putt to win." On Breakfast with Brent Pope, I sit down with guests from the entertainment world, and we do it all over breakfast. Or should I say Brentfast? Every week on Brentfast, you get inside Hollywood info and tips, great breakfast recs and booty debates. Most of all, you get the most delightful 30 minutes of your week. So dig in. It's Brentfast time. Listen at Brentfast.com, Apple Podcasts, or wherever fine podcasts are found.
Do you ever find yourself thinking about who would win in a fight between Goku and Superman? Hi, I'm James Gavsey, and on the Who Would Win show, me and my co-host Ray ignore anything important happening in the outside world and debate fictional battles between characters from comics, movies, and video games.
We got a new show every week, and almost always am I the winner.
Yeah, not true, Ray.
In the past, we've discussed such matches as Captain America versus Darth Vader, Solid Snake versus the Iron Giant, classic matchups like RoboCop versus Terminator, and even the Muppets versus Sesame Street.
That one was crazy. So if you're a fan of geek culture and love a spirited debate, check out the Who Would Win show wherever you get your podcasts, or check us out at whowouldwinshow.com.
They didn't know what they had even after fighting the studio battle. It's just like they still might reject it. We still might not make a buck.
Right, totally. So like, yeah,
Who's Ryan Reynolds again? Yeah.
Yeah, right. You're right. I remember reaching out to Marvel before Disney acquired it about optioning some of their lesser known comic books. They have this comic book from the 2099 series. It was called Ravage 2099.
Ravage.
Yeah, it's cool. So it's like there was like Spider-Man 2099, Punisher 2099, which were obviously the more well known. And then there was Ravage 2099, who was like an original creation. I believe it was a Stan Lee concept, and it was so cool. And that's when I reached out.
Kind of looks like the Hulk, kind of. He's one of the Hulk's enemies. Oh, okay, that's wow.
Yeah. Man. So I reached out to them before Disney acquired it. And at the time, they're like, you must send every request via fax. It was nuts. So I had to actually print out the letter, like request, because we had to like make an offer, and like we faxed it to them. And they obviously rejected it, but it's sad because if we had, more independent, like I said, more independent filmmakers able to option these types of IP, I honestly think you would kind of see more successful.
Absolutely, dude.
Franchise films, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw this hysterical Gremlins fan film.
Oh yeah.
And the Ryan Patrick guy, I think, perfectly helmed it. It could have been anything, and it would have just been a hysterical short film where creatures are attacking a diner. Yeah.
Gotta check it out.
And I was just like, see, this guy, I feel like he kind of captured the 80s without having it be only homages or only see what I did there. I felt a sense of just kind of amusing claustrophobia, for lack of a better reality. And he's done a lot of rap music videos and everything, and it's like, you know what, I would like to give this guy a shot, because he just seems to have a sense of tone. And I think and I've asked everybody from famous comedians and everything what do execs not get certain things. I asked even Frank Conniff, who you might know as TV's Frank from Mystery Science Theater, one time, and are execs just not getting humor nowadays? And he's like, that they get it generally. In my experience, it's just they're not sure how to sell it, and they feel like it needs to be faster, just because it seems like. And so that's kind of the note I'm noticing, is like everyone wants everything faster. It's like, well,
it's sad.
How do I go faster when it's a slow burn scenario I'm presenting?
You're right. It's definitely a challenge. And like we even kind of faced that with As We Know It when we were writing it.
Really?
Because we didn't, the first couple of drafts, we didn't have all of the, necessarily like more I want to say jump scare elements. If like when you saw the film, we had some of those like jump scare moments and,
Yeah.
which were great, don't
In your
get me wrong.
face kind of moments.
Yeah,
It was
exactly. Like funny
interactive.
jump scare, not like, now you're like really scared, but like funny
Yeah,
jump scare.
Return of the Living Dead kind of stuff is like,
Exactly. Right. Kind of poking fun at the jump scare, really,
yeah.
if anything, right? But that type of stuff was not in the original draft.
Really?
It was oh no, yeah, like it was really like, more or less a bromance slash, breakup film.
Yeah, it
Right.
really is. It's a dating.
Yeah, and the zombies in that first draft were like literally in the backdrop. Like the only interaction you would see was from their POV outside the window. And that was it. Like we didn't have any interaction. And look, we could have made that movie, and would it have been, as engaging of a film with audiences? I don't know. It could have been less, it could have been, we don't know. But the notes that we received were more and more and more, right? So then we're like, all right, we got to do this scene. So then we actually wrote it like on the fly. Miss Jones, Emily leaves in a huff, and she wanders around. She ends up at Miss Jones's place, and Miss Jones has turned, and the guys have to save her. So like that was added, and they were like, all right, but actually that's cool because it gives James an opportunity to prove himself that he still loves her and that he.
Either way, I'm glad you didn't get too many unwelcome notes where you're like, okay, these guys are missing the point of what I'm going for.
Yeah, no, totally. I didn't. Yes, we couldn't go like that crazy, but we're like, all right, we'll give you a little bit, but if you want more, we need more. We need a bigger budget. Like it's that simple.
Yes, I'll give you what you want, but it's got to be on these terms.
Yeah, because that's one of the big issues, man. Like with independent films is, a lot of filmmakers bite off more than they can chew, and they're like, oh, I can do all this for this budget, and then that's when you get in trouble as an indie filmmaker. And
I was going to ask you about that. I see so many other people.
Oh yeah,
getting into disputes on budget when some people can handle it and others can't, and it's like, well, but maybe we can film it this way, or maybe we can this explosion can be in audio form versus actually showing it.
Yeah, well, no, and that is what happens is like you end up making sacrifices when you overcommit, right? And you're like, oh yeah, I can do that for that, right? And so so for my film, and I should say my films, that's the opposite of what I want to do. I don't want to misrepresent it at all. I want to say, look, this is what it is. This is why it's this budget. That what you're talking about is an entirely different budget genre. And sure,
it's wild how they're still going for that. They're like they get a big return on a comedy or a horror movie as long as it's like 5 to 10 million.
Right. Yeah, no, and what's even worse is when you see these movies that were made for like $2.5 million that are trying to look like the $50 million movie. And like you said, it's like instead of seeing somebody get cut, they go to a wall and then you just see the blood splatter on the wall, right?
Yeah.
And or you hear the explosion, you don't see the explosion. And then when you start making sacrifices like that, then it's like, oh man, like you're not fooling anybody. But the problem is when you have these indie films with so many executive producers, there are so many cooks in the kitchen, and everybody's like, oh yeah, no, it's fine, it'll work. Like I buy that, and it's not. None of the creatives are involved in that side.
Yeah.
So
there was this one Sci-Fi Channel movie I saw years ago.
Yeah.
And of course, usually their effects aren't very good, but it was a Bruce Campbell joint. And so, call back to, what makes him famous. And it was called Alien Apocalypse, but they kind of took the same kind of Army of Darkness kind of formula. So therefore he made what wasn't working kind of worked for him and the filmmakers. It was like, okay, we're still embracing that this is a 50s type sci-fi parody. It's like, okay, cool.
Yeah. Well, right. As long as it's embraced, I think it's so important, like
instead of, it's not working, but laugh at us anyway. It's like, what?
Yeah, no. And you have that all the time where it's like, you're like, whoa. Yeah. And so as filmmakers, it's not easy because there are a lot of politics, like You have to
So many.
manage the budget, right? And then you have cast, and certain cast members maybe, need to make more than others. And then, when you're negotiating with them, if you're like, okay, I'll pay you that much more, that's money from the actual practical budget of the movie, right?
Oh, yeah.
So you'll have like the production producers are like, all right, yeah, we'll make that promise. Sure, but then you're making sacrifices on the film, right? And so that's a slippery slope. And I hate anytime I'm like in a conversation like that for when I was producing, for example, when I was in those types of conversations, most of the time I'll be like, all right, like I'm just not down to be involved in this project because like if it's gonna look like shit, like I'm sorry, I'm not gonna do it.
Yeah, it makes better sense to just stay true to yourself instead of, well, this might take me somewhere. I I interviewed the director, with Kaya Sayanada, who is best known for films like Talking To and Ballistic X versus Sever. Same kind of
Okay.
deal where each movie he was not so fortunate; it would always get taken away by a producer, even when he followed their instructions. He
Yep.
had a little room where he admitted he needed to mature, and it's so he then started having to do everything from Christian movies to Super Bowl commercials, and then back to doing what he actually wanted to do in Thailand with Mark Dacascos of John Wick and Stargate fame. But
Wow.
it's
Yeah.
like you say, it sucks having to kind of rebuild yourself and then say, well, maybe this will pay off. No, it doesn't pay off. Damn it.
Well, no, you're right, and it's hard. Like once you start making the sacrifices, then it's hard to kind of like get out of that
There will always
shadow.
be a snob. They'll be like, what's the last 5 movies he's made? Oh, they're all
Yeah.
rated 3 out of 10 on IMDb.
Yep. Right. No, absolutely.
Even if
Absolutely.
they're not that bad, it's bad enough because now I got all this
Yeah.
blockade. I got these guys that will never give me a shot.
It's true, and that's the part that is hard. Although I will say, with Bob Zemeckis, he has a great story. I think he had 3 flops
I think
before,
so. Yeah.
right? It was either 2 or 3 flops.
I think there was Marwan, and then, there's like a few others that were kind of recapturing that Forrest Gump kind of.
Yeah, before Back to the Future.
Before. Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, before Back to the Future.
Yeah, there was like, I think he worked on 1941 a bit. Yeah, but yeah, both he and Spielberg had the same story where had that been their first movie, they would have never been able to do the ones that made them millionaires and creative.
Oh yeah, no, and right, and that so like I think the 2 or 3 he did before Back to the Future, those were like projects that like the guy that you recently directed or interviewed, they were offers, right? He was like, they're like, okay, you can direct this, right? So they were jobs, right? They were just gigs, more or less. But with Back to the Future, that was like a real vested interest that he had.
Mm-hmm.
And that just proves, man, like if you want a real success, you got to put your everything in it. Even if it doesn't hit,
it's 100%. An investment. Yeah. This has been delightful though, man, because so many of us want to make this our 9 to 5 job. I think I got burnt out just because I was on a few indie sets and a few professional sets where there wasn't some good attitudes. I would like to try it again, but it would have to be all in time management and everything. Are there any other kind of closing thoughts that you would recommend for anyone who you feel might have the right mentality for it, but they are a ways away from going all the way?
Yeah. No, I'll kind of end with something that I was told in film school that, when you pick up a camera for the first time and you try to make your first film, whether it's a short or a feature, you'll know within 24 to 48 hours if you're a film maker or a film lover.
I love this dissect. I love this discrepancy.
Yep. And there's a big difference, right? Because you can be a film lover, right? You could idolize the classics and love to watch, days and days end classic films, but to actually get behind the camera and to actually attempt to make these types of films, especially if like that's your ambition, you want to make great movies, it's not for the faint hearted, because you got
No.
to put everything in.
Oh, dude, I didn't learn about staging until I got out of the joint. I was just like,
Yeah.
that would have been such a help. Why did they not teach me that? Have you ever tried I know some people debate shot list versus shot, uh, just storyboards. Have you ever tried
Storyboards.
shot script where you're just
Yeah.
writing by the
Yeah,
scene?
no, I do. I often do that where
Good
like,
shortcut, man.
yeah, I do that all the time. And I have a pretty good rapport with my DP, and
Oh,
we,
lovely.
yeah, so like we, for the most part, with as we know, we're on the same page with pretty much every setup. And we, went to the house and we studied it. I want to say at least 14 days prior to shooting. We actually had, this might be an extreme example, but we actually had a draftsman come, and I actually had floor plans made of the house.
Oh man, that's
yeah,
great
man.
dedication, dude.
Yeah, I had floor plans made, and with Steve and our DP, I actually just marked up the floor plans, and we were kind of just emailing back and forth. And so by the time we got there to shoot, like we literally knew every corner of that house. So we, because of that, we were able to utilize it in the best way possible.
That's
Yeah.
Isn't it also wild how construction kind of has parallels to
Oh yeah,
all the
absolutely.
different film crew hats?
Clean lines, man. Like I need clean lines. Like I'm
First
a huge.
unit, second unit.
Oh yeah, man.
If they
Yeah.
screw up, they blame you, even though you weren't there, and you're like, I gave you the plans, you didn't follow the plans.
Yeah. No, you're right, man. You're right. That part of it is tough when you're dealing, with the barking order, and it's like, oh no, I didn't do this, I did that. But ultimately, like what I kind of learned on, as we know it, is just as the director, because you're kind of steering the ship, like keep a very calm head at all times. Like that was for me like so important, because when you were losing your shit, like that's not good.
Right.
Because everybody's looking at you, right?
I mean, that's kind of why the Jaws filmmaking is just so inspirational. That could have been it for Mr. Spielberg.
Oh no, totally, man, totally. So
and he
yeah,
decided, I'm gonna just breathe and take a break and come back, instead of what the fuck is going on.
You can't like.
You imagine had he been an
hard as it is.
asshole and decided, I'm done, this is too much.
I mean, God bless him for surviving that. Shoot, I mean, you hear stories.
The rest of us would have probably been like, I guess it's not meant to be.
Oh,
What did I do?
Talk about like endurance, like that's, and that's kind of what I was talking about. Like when you're, if you're a filmmaker or film lover, like, that's, if you're able to kind of endure and survive these very, very, very stressful situations, and you do it, and then you want more, then right? You want to go back.
You love the thrill of it instead of just acting like all these things you couldn't control anyway. Like, oh, that's the worst. It's like, well, they won't happen again now that I know how to avoid this.
Totally, man. Totally. Yep.
This has been dynamite, my guy. I really hope that the years are still kind to you, and you do get at so many more that you want realized.
I appreciate that. I'm really excited about this next one. As it progresses, I'll definitely keep you posted. When that time comes.
Lovely. If you want, I can even reach out to some of the other guys who, if you want to share that screener with them or anything,
Yeah.
But man, just to actually just get something that you want, realized, is already a challenge as it is. So that's so cool that,
Yeah, no, it's cool, and it's one of those films where like I'm really proud of it. We had a great time. The cast, crew, we all had a great time, and it was a lot of fun.
Perfect, man. And I hope that you keep working with a lot of your same crew. Now that you guys have this
that's
loyalty.
The goal. That's the goal. The crew for sure. I want to keep, because most of those guys that I worked with are LA based, so for sure, yeah.
Splendid. Hey, well, I hope you stay safe out there, and you're able to keep picking a few more brains.
Yeah, no. Hopefully we LA kind of takes a little rain break, because we're not built for the rain in the city.
Yeah, and just especially when you get so many reports and they're not consistent, you're like, okay, I didn't get any indicator of this. Why are we feeling raindrops?
Totally. I know. Yeah.
Man. Hey, thank you so much for your time, and I'm glad we can finally do this. But also, just if anyone needs to organize a set, follow Josh's example.
I appreciate that, man. I appreciate that. Yeah. Look, as with any job, it's a lot of moving parts, a lot of work, but I just, follow your instincts, follow your guts. That's, I think, the best advice I could give.
Right? Better that than just kind of sulk in the corner and not share what's on your mind.
Exactly. Yeah. Or get a kick-ass first AD who has your best interests at heart. That's so important.
So true. You know who Mick Garris is, Hocus Pocus director?
Yeah.
He had a podcast he hosted for a while that he's just finished up, and he had a hysterical idea where he's like, the 80s should be called the executive directors.
Yeah, I love that.
They report to the studio and say, hey, we don't got it. What do we do?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That's very strong.
Good old ADs, man.
Yep. I know.
I'm glad they're getting their due. It's like cinematographers and makeup are kind of becoming better known, and stuntmen are giving them a chance, but it's like, I'm not finally now the ADs.
Oh yeah, no, they deserve a lot of recognition. For sure.
Yeah. Obviously not on the set of Russ, but that's a whole different story.
Oh my God. That's crazy.
Friends close, enemies closer. I hope you get so many more shots.
Thanks, Cam. I appreciate it, man. I appreciate the time.
Godspeed to you, my guy. So much fun.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening.
It's a jacked up